1 Peter chapter 3, beginning in verse 8. While you're turning there, last time we saw Peter talking about how to win an unsaved spouse or a spouse that's not obeying the Word of God properly. And we saw the roles of authority and submission don't change. It doesn't matter which spouse is faithful to God, which one's not. The wife does not try to assume the authority role in the family just because she's the saved person in the household or the one being faithful to God. Either way, it's no different than if those things happened in government. We don't try to overthrow the government because God allows people in there who aren't faithful to Him. The same thing in our place of employment. You don't just, get rid of your boss or try to take their place if they're not doing that either. We still submit within the roles that we're called to do. And so the Christian wife also wasn't to leave an unsaved husband. And she's also not to preach to him. She can give him the gospel if he's unsaved, but other than that, that's the limits of that. She's just supposed to live the life in front of him, the submissive life, and honor God in that way. And the whole intent of her submission to him is that he can be won to Christ. That's the end goal. And so she's to remain faithful to her own husband through that submission. Things like not comparing him to other men, especially not comparing him to Christian men. If he's an unsaved person, you can't expect an unsaved husband or father to act like a saved one is supposed to. And so can't do that. And she's also not supposed to act like she isn't satisfied and maybe shopping around, looking for better options, those kind of things. She's to remain modest in her submission, not looking like she's advertising her body to draw other men's attention there. And we saw the focus is to be on the inner beauty, not necessarily the outer beauty. The outward things are fine. The adorning of the hair and the jewelry and clothing, as long as it's modest, but the focus should be on the inner beauty, virtue and purity, those type of things. Men are also supposed to remain the authority in the home, but we are to submit to the needs of our wives and to know what those things are, pay attention to them, and noticing their beauty and communicating with them and physical contact, whatever they need, and make sure they get those things from us so they're not seeking those other places as well. And so we move into this next section here. It's 4 or 5 verses here. It'll actually take us probably, I'm guessing, 3 weeks to get through these next 5 verses. But these are interesting verses here. And Peter's going to be talking about something that most people crave, but very few people actually achieve. And we see that there in the middle of these verses there. And it's a good life. A good life. So start at verse 8 there this evening. He says, "Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that ye are thereunto called, that ye should inherit a blessing. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips that they speak no guile. Let him eschew evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil." And there in verse 10, we see that expression about loving life and seeing good days. And let's face it, most people would associate the good life with something involving money or possessions, something like that. I don't know about you, but I hear people all the time daydreaming about winning the lottery. And if they could just win the lottery, they'd have the good life. That's what they say. That's not true. We know that. The vast majority of those people who win the lottery end up broke again before it's over with in a short period of time, and then they're miserable because of all the problems it brings along with it down the road. But some would say that if they just didn't have to work anymore, that would be the good life. Well, that's not true either. I can assure you of that, because I know lots of people that don't have to work. And they wouldn't say that they're living the good life, because most of them are broke. They don't have any money. So, well, we don't have to work, but we don't have anything either. And so, they're not really, just barely getting by. We would think, with so many people pursuing the good life, that it's actually pretty amazing that very few people are actually living that type of life, that they love their life, and it's a good life in their mind there. And that should tell us something about the world's way of trying to achieve the good life. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so, in spite of all those failures, people trying it the world's way, there are still many Christians who are trying it the exact same way. They're trying to achieve the good life the way the world pursues those things instead of God's way, and they're also failing to get it too. Solomon, we're going to look at a few verses, and we'll pick up on Solomon all throughout this study because he's a wonderful example of this. But look over in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, starting out there in verse 17. Get a few insights from Solomon, and then we'll come back to our text. But Solomon is probably one of the most glaringly obvious failures of the world's method of trying to have a good life. And he is doing it the world's way, and goes about it multiple ways that the world would do. But in all of Scripture, he's probably the greatest failure that we see of those kind of attempts. And when you look at Solomon's life, we know Solomon had the things that a lot of people say, if I had this, then I'd have a good life. I'd love my life. I'd do those kind of things. Did Solomon have money? Oh yeah. Piles and piles of money. It's just amazing the amount of money that he was accumulating and bringing in all the time. Did he have possessions? Oh yeah. Yeah, not just possessions. He had peculiar treasures. All of these exotic animals and things that nobody else had. And he collected those kind of things. What about women? Yeah, he had plenty of women too. Unfortunately, there. Did he have power? Oh, sure. Fame? Oh, yeah, his fame spread all over the world there. Did he have land? Yeah. Homes? Yeah, multiple homes, multiple palaces, palaces, what Solomon had. Did he have servants? Yeah, had people to take care of all those things. You name it, Solomon had it. And in spite of having all of those things that people are trying to get to have a good life today, did he have that kind of life? No. What kind of life did he have? A life that he hated. Ecclesiastes 2:17. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me. For all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Is it because that Solomon was working so hard to get those things? No, he wasn't doing those things, was he? No, all that gold and stuff, all those treasures and stuff, servants, other people in the kingdom were bringing those to him. He wasn't doing that work himself, right? But it was a miserable life, and it's just full of dread and regret, and in his own words, a wasted life. Vanity there. If you back up one chapter, back in Ecclesiastes 1, there close to the beginning, verse 2, Ecclesiastes 1 verse 2, he says, Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Everything's worthless in his mind. Right? Skip down to verse 11. We talked about that fame that Solomon had. That's the admiration of so many others. Ecclesiastes 1:11. What about that? He was a very famous person there. He says, there is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. You can skip ahead to verse 16 of chapter 2, and he says the same thing in the next chapter. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. If it weren't for the pages of Scripture, most people wouldn't even know who Solomon was. You can talk about athletes, and I know we remember hearing people, Wilt Chamberlain and those kind of Sandy Koufax and those kind of things. People that they didn't really make movies about. Now you talk about Babe Ruth and things like that. They've made a lot of movies about people like that. But you go back and you look at some of those people that were really famous athletes in their day, and you ask some of the kids today or mention that name, and they'll say, "Who? Who is that?" And they'll fade from existence, and some already have as the generations have gone on. And after the famous person passes away, then the people that knew that person, they pass away, and eventually their remembrance is passed away. And like I said, if we didn't have Solomon in the pages of Scripture, most people wouldn't know who he was either. So even look at Ecclesiastes 1 verse 15. Back up again. Even though he has massive amounts of money and treasures, why didn't that satisfy him? The same reason money doesn't satisfy people today. The same reason possessions don't satisfy people today. Ecclesiastes 1:15. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. What's that last part talking about? How much money is enough money? How much possessions is enough possessions? How big a house is big enough? You see that all the time, and it seems like this one's trying to outdo this one, and the next one's trying to outdo that one. I heard on the radio somebody had $100 million wedding. This one rich family married this other rich family, and they spent $100 million just on the wedding. If you're going to do that, just invite 100 people and give them $1 million each. Just don't just blow it away for something nonsensical. For that, that's not going to be remembered. What they're hoping there. But he has this massive amount of money, and the wanting there, the desire for more, it can never be satisfied. You can't put a number on it. And people say, "Oh, if I had $1 million, I'd do this." If you had $1 million, guess what you'd want? More. And you'd say, "Well, how much more?" I can't remember if it was one of the Rockefellers or one of them Kennedys or one of them rich person one time. They asked him one time, said, "You've got all this money, how much more, do you need?" And he said, "Just a little more." That was always the answer, just a little more. And so, you can't. Nobody will say, "Well, if I'd get this much, then that's all I'd need. I'd be satisfied the rest of my life," because that's not true. The wanting's still there. And it's never enough. You can't put a number on it. That's what Solomon was talking about there in verse 15. No matter how much gold he piled in, no how much silver he piled in, no how much stuff he piled in, it was still never enough. Still never enough. And so Solomon even tried some foolish ways. You get a miserable life. We understand this. Still happens today. It happened in Ecclesiastes 2 verse 3. You realize you're a miserable person. You're not satisfied. You're not happy. Even though you've got things, and a lot of people try the same route that Solomon tried. They try to kill that pain with alcohol or drugs or whatever that is, and he did that too. He says in Ecclesiastes 2:3, "I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life." And he's just one miserable attempt after another. That's what he's doing there, and he never gets it. He never enjoys a good life. The closest thing he has to it is at the very beginning, when God sees he has a pure heart and gives him that one thing, anything you want. You remember, and he asked for wisdom, right? He's got a good life then. But then he turns away from God and seeks it the world's way. And after that point, it's just miserable. It's just wretched there. And in spite of everything he gained. Look over in 2 Chronicles chapter 9. He did some amazing things in other people's eyes. Now, in his own eyes, he comes to the same conclusion over and over again. It's just vanity. It's just worthless, just useless, just miserable life that I'm going to have to leave behind. I've accumulated all these things. I've done all these things, and they were some spectacular things that he accomplished from a human standpoint. They really were. That this is the fame has spread, as we said, it spread all over there. But 2 Chronicles chapter 9. In verse 1, we'll read a few verses while we're over here, but 2 Chronicles 9 and verse 1, this is, his fame has spread to the Queen of Sheba. Now it's pretty impressive if you're a king that you can impress another royalty from another place. And this is the Queen of Sheba, and she's so impressed that she has got to come and see this for herself. It's not believable what she's heard. There's no way it's this good. 2 Chronicles 9:1, he says, and when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to prove Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem with a very great company, and camels that bear spices, and gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. Now you notice, she's showing off a little bit too, isn't she? She comes with her stuff too. Oh, well, you think this is impressive. She brings her gold in abundance. She brings these spices. She brings these precious stones. She's going to show off a little bit too. We'll see. We'll see how you compare, how you measure up to me. And she's coming to disprove all of those stories that she had heard about how wonderful Solomon was and how great his kingdom was. And because it can't be that good. That's what her mind is. Now look at verse 2 through 4 there. 2 Chronicles 9, he says, and Solomon told her all her questions, and there was nothing hid from Solomon which he told her not. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, his cupbearers also, and their apparel, and his ascent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. That literally means no more breath. We'd say this, speechless. Right. She asked him all she can think of. He's answered all those questions, and she's speechless. It's unbelievable, but yet it's true. And the splendor of Solomon's kingdom really was unmatched, and his servants enjoyed serving him. Even the ones holding his cup and doing those things and attending to just menial tasks. They dress nice. They're happy. All of those things are going on, and everything seems to be perfect in her eyes, in the Queen of Sheba's eyes. It's not in his heart, though, is it? No, everything looks good on the outside, and yet on the inside he's still a miserable person. That's the trap that Satan, I believe, loves to catch people in. The pursuit of the good life. Right? People are pursuing a good life and hopes that they will eventually get it if they keep pursuing it long enough. But the reality is, most never get it. They never get to this because they don't do it God's way. They're doing it the world's way. But they keep trying, and maybe changing paths slightly along the way, still trying the same methods of the world, still hoping, still assuming that it'll all work out eventually. Eventually, they'll have the good life. And some think that maybe that's not going to happen in their life, during their working life, and they say, oh, well, if I can just get to retirement, then I'll have the good life. Right? And they think they're going to have money, and then they realize you got to pay for your own health care, and and they start taking more out than what they're giving you back. And you say, well, I don't think I have as much as I thought I was going to have. And those things, one right after another. And they keep hoping and hoping. And then at some point they see It's not going to happen. I've tried it this way my whole life. And like Solomon, they get to a point and they say, well, it's really been a waste. It's really not even going to happen. It's not even possible. Guess what the highest suicide rate in America by far is? What age group of people? Anybody know? Oh no, it's not teenagers. Not even close. The highest of any group is 84 years and up. Guess what the second highest group is? 60 to 84. Not even close. I'd think teenagers, young adults, those kind of people, because that's what we seem to hear about most. It's not even close. By far, people 60 years and older commit suicide more than any other group in America. Right? I believe it's because people get to that point in their lives. They've been chasing the good life, hoping they're going to have more money, they're going to have something, more stuff, things are going to get better all the time. When you get between 60 and 84, you should be thinking about what? Retirement, right? Something, making it easy. And if you haven't been able to achieve money and possessions, and by that time, right, what's your chances of getting it after that? And people realize, hey, I've wasted my life trying to get this, and now I'm too old. I can't work like I used to. I can't do the things like I used to. And some of them get to that point and they say, well, I'm never going to have a good life. And they end their life. And I'm not saying that's why all of them do it, but I'm sure a lot of them do it for that very reason. And so they've been chasing that, and then when things start to fail, their health starts to fail, and they don't have money, they don't have possessions, they don't kind of things. And the sad thing is, it happens to Christians too. It's not just unsaved people. Christians do that too, and the reason a lot of that happens is because haven't followed God's plan. If you chase the world's way to the good life, you'll end up the way the rest of the world ends up. It won't happen for you. But every Christian should be living a good life, loving life. Every Christian should be doing that. And material things have nothing to do with it. Doesn't matter how much money you got, doesn't matter how little money you have. There in 1 Peter 3 verse 10 it says, for he that will love life. Now, the normal word for life is spelled B-I-O-S. It's pronounced bios, but we get words like biology and biological from that B-I-O-S. That's where that word comes from. That's the root of it. Right? That's talking about things that are alive. Right? The study of biology is the study of things that are living as compared to things that are dead. That's not the word for life that Peter uses here. He's not just talking about, I'd rather be alive than dead. That's not what he's saying. I had a woman tell me about her life a week or so ago, and I asked her how she was doing, and she was talking about some things that were failing, but she said it's better than the alternative. I have to assume if somebody says living is better than the alternative, that they're probably not saved. Because a Christian, dying is the best alternative for us, or the rapture, because we get to go to heaven. Our life gets better at death, and it kind of bothered me when she said that. But it's not true for an unsaved person. Living is better for them. At least they've got more opportunity maybe to get saved. But for us, no, dying is the better option. Peter uses that word. He doesn't use the word bios there. He uses it later in chapter 4, verse 3 there. It's referring to our existence, just living before we were saved is what he's talking about in 4:3. He says, for the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. He uses that word there, and he says, we were just living life. We were just sinning is what we were doing. We were doing what the Gentiles did, just whatever we felt like was good there. But he uses a different word back in chapter 3 and verse 10. And that word for life is zoe, which is fullness of life, or the time of life. There are people who are alive today. That's the bios. They're just living, but they're not living a full life. They're not having the time of they're just existing. That's a good way. That's a good way to put it. I have a man who's sick, and he's had multiple problems. He lost his wife. Lori knows who I'm talking about. And he's got a lot of health problems, and they were getting their schedule mixed up, and they'd be dozing during the day, and then they'd be up half the night. And he says this over and over: "This is not living." He's alive, but he's not really living, just existing. Certainly doesn't have a full, fulfilling life. Certainly wouldn't be called a good life in his mind there. But, we're talking about here is fullness of life, having a good life all the time, not just when you're on vacation, not just when you're with your family or your friends or doing certain things that you like to do. This is talking about every part of life is good. Even when we got to go to work, right? It's a good life. Right? I could tell you some funny things about Dwayne today that I heard, but I'm not going to. But it's only funny because I've been there and done those kind of things. But it made me chuckle when I heard about it. But some of the things that we don't enjoy doing, my boys are learning now that they got to do their own dishes. You dirty those dishes, Mom, don't clean them no more. You got to do those, and you can love that chore too. They got to do their own laundry, and they're going to have to mow their own grass and do those kind of things. Grocery shopping, and even going to the doctor and dentist. We don't enjoy those things necessarily, but there can be good in that. There can be something. I won't say I love going to the doctor, but I love going to the doctor if they can give me something to help me get better faster. So there's some love in there. There's something good in there that you can enjoy there. But good days, that word actually means they're meaningful, they're useful, they're productive, they're fulfilling, not wasted, like Solomon describes them. And so everybody wants that kind of life. They want a good life, and they want to love their life. And here God tells us how to have it, how every Christian can have it there. And you can't forget what's going on with these people back in 1 Peter. Again, the context when Peter's writing here, you remember Nero is accused the Christians of burning Rome. And so they're being persecuted, killed, right, blamed. And so they're going through a lot here in 1 Peter, back up a couple chapters, 1 Peter 1:6, wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations. It's odd that Peter uses the word you greatly rejoice and heaviness and manifold temptation in the same thing. They are going through some serious trials there. They are suffering some persecution, and yet Peter says, ye greatly rejoice. There's still good in that. Right? There in chapter 2 and verse 1, he says, dearly beloved, I beseech you, as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. And we talked about that. They don't really belong to this world. As Christians, we don't really belong to this world, and yet we're here. We're a part of it. But we can't be comfortable among sin. There in 1 Peter 2, verse 21, he says, for even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us example, that ye should follow his steps. We are going to suffer for our faith if we follow Christ's example. Christ suffered, we're going to suffer. 1 Peter 3:1, but and if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye, and be not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled. And so he's reminding them they can be happy. Was that verse 14 instead of what? 1 Peter 3:14, excuse me. 3:14. They can still be happy in spite of all those things. Even Christians who are suffering much more than we do here in our country right now, they can still have a good life, they can still love life. And so can we. This evening, most of this will be from verse 8 this evening, 1 Peter 3. It starts off with the right kind of attitude. I remember my mother said that a lot to my sister. I don't know that we had a better attitude than she did, but she showed hers on her face a lot. And she said, "You better straighten up that attitude right now." I hear that a lot. You better straighten up that attitude. And then that's a good starting place. If you've got a bad attitude to begin with, you're not a happy person. It's not a good life. Can't love life that way. And that's where God starts here with our attitudes. And he lists several of them here. Look at verse 8 again. He says, "Finally, be all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous." That's 5 attitudes there that we start with there in this one verse. And he's just wrapped up this last section that started in 1 Peter 2:11 with dealing all the spheres of life. Our submission to the government and human institutions, our submission in the workplace, our submission to the family roles in the home, those kind of things. And these attitudes are directed toward everyone, not just toward our church family, not just toward our Christian friends, family, neighbors, not just to people who are saved. These have to be directed toward saved and unsaved people. And some of these are going to be a little hard to learn. But once we do them, you'll see as we go along, they get easier. And they actually become a part of who we are, a part of our being, instead of just something we paint on. You know people, I hope I'm not one of these kind of people, but do you know people that talk different when they're around certain kind of people? "Oh, how you doing? Oh, you..." They don't talk like that to anybody else, do they? Those people don't come up to me and say, "Oh, how you doing?" No, they say, "How you doing?" Well, they just talk normal. And that's who they really are. I hope I don't do that to people, but if I do, let me know. I want to know. But the idea is that this is who we are. This is the attitude that we are all the time. We're not just painting on a pretty one in front of certain people and then we're living something else at home or around other people there. And so here he starts off with of one mind there, that first one there. The word is homophron, which is like-minded, or harmonious is the word we get from that. In harmony there. And we're to show harmony to the world through our unity, through our love for one another. That starts with the church for sure. We've seen that recently with Paul and the Corinthian church and encouraging them to have unity and not have divisions, not be fighting with one another and strife, those type of things. And that's all over the New Testament, by the way. Romans 12:16, I'll just read you a few of them. "Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits." Romans 15:5, "Now the God of patience and consolation grant you to be like-minded one toward another according to Christ Jesus." Same idea, harmonious in unity. Philippians 2:2, "Fulfill ye my joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and of one mind." In 1 Corinthians 1:10, "Now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that ye all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you, but that ye be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment." And so harmony, unity, like-mindedness, that should be the norm for Christians, to be that way with each other. It really should. We get along with each other. We don't strive with one another. And we know we're supposed to be peacemakers. Matthew 5:9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." I do confess, I do like to stir up sometimes. I like to tease Lori and them at work. I'm not going to deny that, but I'm not trying to make her mad. I'm not trying to stir up a fight. I just like to see her get riled up a little bit, and then we can laugh and go on. But we are supposed to be peacemakers. Peacemakers there. Back in 1 Peter 3:8, that's the first one, harmony. Getting along with people. Like-mindedness. There. The next one he says, finally be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another. Sympathies. Now guess which word we get from that? Sympathetic. Sympathetic. Compassion. Feeling for the sufferings of others. Right? Now that comes natural for us, for other believers. I was asking Brenda how she was doing. She been sick? Because we were asking Sunday, and he said, well, I don't know. I haven't heard. I don't know. I haven't heard. And then I got busy Monday and forgot to text and felt bad about that when she said Pat texted, and I didn't do that, right? But we're sympathetic. We know people have issues, and they know that they're going to be sick at times. And Gail, I was worried about her and her back and all that, and she did send me a text and told me what the doctor said, so I appreciate that. Right? Brenda, you could have done that and kept me from worrying some, but that's okay. No, but we have that. It's natural. We worry about. We're anxious. We're concerned about our church family. And so that's compassion. Now, if it goes to the point where you can't sleep at night and you're worried to death and your blood pressure's up and you're going to a crazy place, I can tell you that's a sin. But concern and sympathy, that's necessary. That's important, right? I had a lady come to me privately last week, and she said, now I know this might be a little personal, but she said, I want to ask you this. She said, are you okay? And I said, well, yeah, I'm okay. Why? And she said, you didn't quite seem like yourself Sunday. And I was a little anxious, the sinful kind of anxious about those crazy mortgage things that the boys were going through and getting all that paperwork straightened out. And we were coming down to a deadline that had to be done by, Friday or something like that, right? And we go there to sign the papers and get Parker's things taken care of at 3:30 on Friday evening. And we show up and they say, oh, the bank didn't send us any papers. I called the bank. He said, you probably need to try to get a hold of them. I called one person. I called two people. I called three people. I called four people. We're sitting in this room. We don't have any idea. They went out. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not going to happen. And so, those kind of things were weighing on me. And I try not to let those things bother me, but they did. And I had that laryngitis almost the whole week. That was bothering me too, and I was worried about if that was going to come back. But that was sin. I understand that was sin. But this person noticed there was something not quite right. Something not quite right. And you can tell that. Sometimes those people that you have those sympathy for and compassion for, you might not know what it is that's wrong, but you know something's wrong. It's not the same. It's different in some way there. And so, that's we get close to people, and especially in our church family, and we can tell those kind of things, but that's a stronger bond than we have with most other people. But this feeling of compassion and being sympathetic, it has to be directed toward unsaved people too. We have to notice things about them too. Is something wrong? What's going on? Is there something we can pray about? Is there something we can help with? It's easy sometimes for us to grow kind of calloused or insensitive to people who are unsaved, especially those that we know they've caused a lot of their own problems. Their sin has brought on their own problems. And some of that's repeated over and over and over again. I had a couple cousins that got into drugs, wrecked their lives. One of them ended his life. The other one's in prison, as far as I know right now. But my dad, when they get out of prison, they'd be looking for somebody and nobody would hire them. And my dad would hire them every single time. Every single time. And I'm thinking some of them had stolen tools off of him. They'd done, pawned stuff, stolen things out of his house and pawned them. And they'd get out of jail. They'd come to him, ask him if he'd work them. And he'd say, yeah, I'll work you. I'm like, Dad. I didn't understand this then. It was it was sympathy, it was compassion, even though they weren't saved. But that's the idea. You know, sometimes we see people like that, and their life is darker. It's uglier maybe than what ours was before we got saved. That doesn't mean they need God any less than we did. Just because their life, they're coming from a darker place or an uglier path or whatever that is. And so we do need to have compassion and sympathy for them. We can't lose that. You can't. You can't have a good life if you're just going to shut people out and just you're dead to me. You did me wrong this way, and I'm never going to forgive you. You can't have a good life that way. You can't love life. It's always going to weigh on us. And so that's one of these things. He says you got to have that. Verse 8 again, he says, finally be all of one mind, having compassion one of another. Love as brethren. Now that's an interesting phrase. Philadelphos, brotherly love. This doesn't say to love just the brethren. This is for saved and unsaved. What he's saying here is love as brethren. How would you love this person if they were a Christian? How would you love this person if they were living for God? If they were a part of our church family or something like that? And we love the brethren in unselfish ways, forgiving ways. 1 Peter 1:22, look back there at that verse. 1 Peter 1:22, seeing ye have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit unto unfeigned love of the brethren. See that ye love one another with a pure heart fervently. Now it starts out with the love that God places in us. Now, we obeyed the truth. We accepted the gospel. God places the love in us. But it extends out from there. And so, can we love others, even those who are unsaved, the same way we would love a brother or a sister? Can we do that? Can we love them the way Christ loved us? Even when they're still not saved? How did God love us before we were saved? Romans 5:8. But God commendeth His love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Christ loved us before we were saved. He loved us as sinners. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. God loved the world. God loved the unsaved people enough to die for everyone. And the right kind of attitudes in the church, that living in harmony, having sympathy for others that are going through things, loving them all along the way, those things will spill over to the world if they become a part of our life. If you get used to loving people that way and practice in your own church family, among your Christian friends, it's eventually going to spill over into other areas and won't be just the things that we choose to do. It'll be things that we have to do. I always remember my parents taught us, me and my brother, Don, my younger brother wasn't around yet, but they taught us to hold the door for ladies. When you went to the store, when we went to Hills or Murphy's or Heck's or wherever grocery store, you didn't have automatic doors. Everything you had push door open back then. And so they always taught us to hold the door for the ladies. And it didn't matter who the lady was. Didn't matter if it was an older lady. Didn't matter if it was a young person. Didn't matter if it was a kid. You were supposed to hold the door for a lady. Right? And they did that. Right? And once you develop that attitude, guess what happens? It won't go away. It won't go away. When I see somebody coming up to the door, I can't help but push the door open. Doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't have to be just a woman. I'll do it for Joe too. Even Dwayne. Right? But you can't help it. Right? And that's what we want, where those attitudes become so much a part of our own heart that you do them without even thinking about them. You just want to do them. They're a part of you at that point. And at some point, you can't not do it. Sheila and I, when we were dating, we'd go up to the mall or somewhere and I'd hold the door for her, but there'd be another lady coming by. And I'm like, Okay. Here we go. They might be 2 or 3, and she's walked 100 feet down through there, and next thing you know, she turns around and she's not talking to me. What are you doing? You can't hold the door for every woman coming into the mall. I couldn't let it slam in her face. I didn't know what to do. You know, it's a hard decision there. And it becomes a part of us there in 1 Peter 3:8. That's one of those attitudes there. Here he says, 1 Peter 3:8, finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful. Eusplanchnos. That's an interesting word, right? It's similar to having compassion, but it means well compassion or tender-hearted, to have pity for. The only other time you see this word used in the New Testament is Ephesians 4:32, when it says, and be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted. That's that word there. Forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. And you can see from that verse, it's tied to forgiveness. It's that deep compassion that allows us to look past the flaws of others there, to see what God sees, the potential for good. And you know that as well as I do. I had other people, not just those cousins, but other people in the family that, I mean, they did some horrible, miserable things in their life. And you know, their parents would just keep taking them back in, taking them back in, taking them back in. And, you know, and they were trying to look past that. They were still tender-hearted. They were forgiving no matter what they did. They just kept forgiving, kept bringing them back in. There, that last one, 1 Peter 3:8. Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous. Philophron, which literally means friendly of mind. Friendly of mind. That's just a general kindness, general courteousness. You know, simple acts of kindness mean a lot to people, don't they? I mean, just simple things. Sheila leaves the quarter in her buggy at Aldi all the time. She sees somebody coming, she says, here, you can have this. Oh, here's a quarter. Oh, no, I don't want the quarter. No. And you think, oh, it's just a quarter. What's the matter? It's a quarter. But it's the idea of it. Some people don't have a quarter when they go to Aldi, and you can't get a buggy if you ain't got one. And so, you know, it's just the idea that I see some residents at the nursing home sitting out on the front porch, you know, when the weather's nice, and some of them, they're just out to get some air. You know, it is a little stuffy inside. It's a different smell on the inside. And I know they've got sanitizers and all that. It smells medical or something to me. It's an odd smell. So, you know, it is nice for them, those that can, to be able to get out. And they've got an area on the side of the building up there in Wortland, and then they've got the one on the front. And you know, I see those people out there. I'm just going to the window to give the secretary the mail. But I talk to those people all the time. I don't know them from Adam. But they're sitting out there, and so I figure you ain't escaping. They're not running away, so, you know, I can talk to them. And so I just talk to them there, and, you know, how you doing? Just, you know, nice day, something. Just anything to engage with them. And they just, some people you can tell it just tickles them that somebody noticed them, that they paid attention to them. That's really interesting. There's a man that's been sitting out there with his son, I'm assuming, there for, I don't know, it's been a week or two now. They've been sitting out there on the front porch, and I'll see him out there, and the others will come and go, but this man, and I think it's his son, they're sitting out there almost every time I come by. I come by and I talk to them, you know, the first day. Hi, how you doing? Oh, doing good, you know. Get back in the truck and go on. Second day I come back and, oh, how you doing? Oh, we're doing good. Just enjoying this weather. And, you know, it was a few seconds longer, and I delivered the mail and got back in the truck. Third day I come along and I said, I don't know what you two did that they won't let you back inside there, but you better fix it. You've been out here 3 days now. And that old guy just started chuckling like he couldn't control himself. And I said, what'd you do? And he said, it must have been bad, but I can't remember. He said, and we just had a fun time there. It was just 30 seconds. and I was just trying to be friendly. And yet, who got the blessing out of it? Well, I did too. They enjoyed it. That's this attitude there. We're developing a friendship, me and them two guys there. I don't even know their names. They don't know mine. But I look forward now to seeing them on the porch and just talking to them just 15 or 20 seconds there. And it's good for me, and it's good for them. And so, but that's part of the good life, isn't it? I mean, it's just somebody that can't get out of the nursing home. He's got something. I don't know if he's just rehabbing or if he's going to be a long-term patient, but right now he has to be there. And so, there's something good in life that you can love, that you can look forward to there. And so that's what these attitudes do. They give us some kind of joy out of life. But, are these the attitudes that we have toward everyone? Are you thinking about holding the door for somebody? Not because I told you to, but because you want to. As a kindness, just a courtesy thing. Trying to brighten somebody's day with a smile. Just smile at people. You go up to somebody like this and go, what do they think? Well, when they look at me, they think, what are you up to, Ron? What did you do? Who are you pranking? Well, there was something. But they do that. If you smile at somebody, I don't care if it's that creepy smile or anything, they'll smile back and they'll, what? Something. Just engaging with them. Right? If you can do something to make somebody's life easier. I heard Dwayne talking about he carries his impact thing for his car, because if catch somebody with a flat tire on the side of the road, and we've done this too. They don't have a jack. They don't have a tire tool. They got a spare. But they got nothing to get it from the tire to the wheel, from the trunk to the wheel, right? And so you come along, you've got a jack or you've got a tire tool or something like that, and you can stop in 5 minutes. You can you can have them back on the road and do something. But it's that opportunity. I got tickled because Dwayne had changed trucks, and he said I saw somebody with a flat tire and I didn't have a tool. I couldn't fit it on Dad's truck. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you don't have it, and you can't even use it. Right? But what does the right attitude do for us? That's where Peter starts. It's the right attitude. What does it do? Well, it gets us ready. So when the opportunity comes, then we can act, and we don't even have to think about it. If you're just used to those kind of attitudes showing up all the time, you won't even think about it. You'll just do it. It'll be so natural. People like this sometimes that they say, if I can do anything, let me know. But it's really awkward. You think they're sincere, but it's really awkward. And then somebody else will come along and they'll just say, hey, I'm going to cut your grass. I know you ain't got to. No, I don't want you to cut me grass. I'm cutting your grass. And they just do it. And it's a blessing, and they know how to do that because they've already got that attitude. I'm going to help you. I'm going to do something for you, right? And I want to do it, right? Try to make me stop, right? That's kind of the attitude. And, it's easier to accept that kind of help. It really is. Philippians 2:3. There ain't no 30 in Philippians 2. Philippians 2:3, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. We're focusing on other people. That's the kind of life Jesus lived, wasn't it? Isn't that what he lived all the time? Focusing on others. There were times when people sought him out, but even when that happened, even when people were tracking him down to get something, what was he doing when that happened? He's already living these kind of attitudes. He's already having them, and it's ready, and so it just happens. He just acts when those times happen. Matthew 9 and verse 18 is one example of that. Matthew 9:18. Read a few of those verses, and then we'll close there. But Matthew 9, verse 18, he says, while he spake these things unto them, behold, there came a certain ruler and worshipped him, saying, my daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thine hand upon her, and she shall live. Now, what's he doing when the ruler comes? What's he doing there? He's teaching them. What he's doing is he's teaching the crowds. He's concerned about others. He's concerned about the things that they know there. And so he said, well, I spake these things unto them. He's teaching the crowds there. This guy comes and tracks him down and says, hey, come and heal my daughter. Right? You remember that story there. He's going to heal this man's daughter. Right? When he begins following this man to his house, what happens there in verse 19 and 20? And Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. Another woman sought him out on the way for her own healing. You remember, she touches the hem of his garment. He stops and says, who touched me? And the disciple says, what do you mean? Who touched you? Everybody in the crowd's trying to touch you and throwing you and doing all this. He says, oh no, virtue's gone out of me. Somebody just got healed. Somebody's faith healed them. And he turns, and the woman, you remember, she's scared to death, and they have the conversation there. In that meantime, while he's dealing with her, what happens to the girl? The ruler's daughter. She dies. She dies. You remember, they come and say, trouble the master no more. Right? She's dead. Right? And what does he do? Oh, no. No, that's not how it's going to play out. Follows her to the house, you remember? Oh no, she's just sleeping. You remember, they laughed him to scorn. Mocked him. Oh, you think we don't know when a girl has died or not? Right? He puts them all out. Right? And then does what? Brings her back to life. Brings her back to life. Right? You know, he's moving from place to place. Sometimes it's a big crowd. Sometimes it's a small group. Sometimes it's individuals. It never changes. Jesus has that same attitude. I want to help. I want to be kind. I want to have sympathy. I want compassion. Those kind of things. Harmony. All of those attitudes are there. You know, what we get out of life, whether it's good or whether it's bad, whether we love it, whether we hate it, starts with the attitudes that we have. And it starts with these. And that's where we'll continue next time and probably the week after. But this is the start. How to have a good life. How to love your life. Okay. Any questions or comments for this evening?